I'm pleased to welcome Ben Braddock, who is the founder, co-owner, and head brewer at Hog River Brewing Company in Hartford. It's an awesome space, and he was just telling me that they have a new axe throwing business in there. They have a program for entrepreneurs. Reset is in there. I've visited this space. It's a really cool space, so if you haven't checked it out, please do so. But I'm happy to have him here with us tonight, and he'll be talking about his experience starting his craft beer brewing company. So please join me in welcoming Ben.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. I don't know if we're going to have 2 people or 20 people, so it's good to see a few faces out there and a few familiar faces as well. Tonight we're going to just kind of have a broad discussion about just opening a business in general, a little bit about my background, where I come from, how I got to where I am, and then we'll kind of dive into the opening a craft brewery in my journey. It might be a little different than some, but and then kind of where we stand at Hog River Brewing Company right now and where we're going down the road. Talk about the growth phase a little bit and where we're going to be going over the next few years. So we'll keep things, pretty simple and high level. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. I was saying before the presentation to a few people, I'm an open book. At this point in the craft beer industry, there's about 70 breweries in Connecticut with about 24 in planning at least that we're aware of. So I think in the next year or two, we're going to have close to 100 breweries here in the state. And, I think we're all kind of doing the same thing. We might make a few different styles of beer and make those beers differently, but a lot of us have the same approach. The only difference with me is I've been doing this for about 10 years with other breweries, so I might have a little more insight into it. So feel free to fire questions at me. I'm more than happy to answer them. My background, I grew up here in Simsbury, actually, as did my wife. We both graduated from Simsbury High School. I graduated in '96. My wife Joy graduated in '98. I left Simsbury right after graduating high school, and I moved up to Boston, where I played some college basketball, and then went up down in South Carolina and graduated from Clemson University, and then came back up north, followed my girlfriend at the time, like every young guy does, and ended up working in the insurance industry. So I started at the Hartford and worked there for a bunch of years and made the rounds. I worked for 5 different insurance companies. And while doing that, I got my master's in business as well. While working in the insurance industry and sitting at my desk, I was getting a little frustrated with my career path, so I decided to start home brewing. That's kind of what lit the fire, got the passion going a little bit. So that's, once I started home brewing, that's kind of, when I decided that I wanted to start moving in my own direction instead of working for somebody else. Instead of someone else being my boss, I want to be my own boss. I want to make my own decisions. I realized over my career in the insurance industry that, I didn't like people telling me what to do. I got frustrated at that all the time. I wanted to make my own shots, and if I was going to fail, it was going to be on my shoulders. And I like the thought of that. I kind of thrive in that situation, and so. Once I started homebrewing, I caught the bug, and we were off to the races. At that time, I didn't know that I wanted to open a craft brewery, but we started to move in that direction just kind of naturally. So this is a little picture of the bar in our tap room. So our tap room holds about 200 people. So we have an 18-foot long bar with 10 seats and 16 tap lines, pouring anywhere from, depending on how busy we are, 4 to 12 of our own beers. We pour hard cider from New England Cider Company. We sell kombucha on draft. We sell cold brew coffee and a few other products as well. So my path to a business owner, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather, Jim Hudson, who also lived in Simsbury, he came back from World War II and started a construction company. So he started that up in the late 40s, early 50s. a lot of the older neighborhoods around Simsbury were actually built by my grandfather and his business partner. They built developments and apartment complexes throughout Simsbury, all the way out into Manchester. He ended up passing away in the 90s, and then that's when I moved to Simsbury. Before moving to Simsbury, my parents were also entrepreneurs. They owned a liquor store out in Granby. They ran that from the late 80s into the mid to late 90s. Once the recession hit in the 90s, they came upon hard times. Their store was right on the Granby-Southwick line, so what happened to them was that people could drive into Southwick and buy booze, a lot cheaper. The hours for the stores, they were open later. So in an attempt to save the business, they opened up a deli and convenience store next door to the package store, but it was a little too late. So they closed everything down, and as I mentioned, that's when we moved to Simsbury. But moving along to my path, education, I talked about that a little bit. My education was always focused on opening a business. I always knew that was the direction I wanted to go. I just didn't know it'd be beer at the time. So I personally looked into a lot of different business ideas, especially when I was in business school. At the time, it was kind of like, I have a lot of college debt. Where can I go that's going to make me the most amount of money? I wasn't even looking at like what's going to make me happy, just what's going to make me money, and how can I be a successful business person. Little did I know at the time, like success comes in many different packages. So that was a life lesson I learned early on. Instead of just chasing one path toward money and pseudo success, I guess you could say, I decided to go another direction. But my associate's degree was in business administration at Clemson. I got my bachelor's in business, and then eventually my MBA. And then even once I got my first brewing job about 10 years ago, I continued my education and went to the Siebel Institute of Technology in Chicago, which is the oldest brewing school in the country, where I did a brewing program there. So, in my opinion, education's important. Definitely gets your mind thinking a certain way, but it's not the end all be all. So experience goes a long way as well. So I was fortunate enough to get a little bit of both early on. So once I decided I wanted to go in the direction of craft brewing or the craft brewing industry, I didn't know that I wanted to be a brewer. I didn't know if I wanted to work in sales. I didn't know if, promotions, marketing, whatever it was. I knew I just wanted to get my foot in the door. I was going to do whatever it took to get my foot in the door. So I actually quit my insurance job. I was on a project out in Minnesota, and I was doing consulting at the time. And they shipped me out to Minnesota, and I get there, and this group of people are meeting me right in the parking lot, and they're like, "We're so glad you're here. You're going to save this project," and blah, blah, blah. I didn't even know what project I was working on. So I get into the office that day, and they're asking me all these questions, and I had no idea what was going on. It was probably one of the worst days of my life. I just ended up sitting there at the conference table, just like a deer in headlights. So I got home, I got back to the hotel that night, and I called my wife, and she's like, "When you get back on Monday, you know what you have to do. You're going to quit your job. You're going to go into your boss's office. You're going to quit. You're going to follow your dream of working in the craft beer industry." And again, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no experience. Outside of homebrewing a couple batches, I didn't really know a whole lot. But I did it. I went in that Monday and walked into my boss's office, and I told him I was leaving. Here's my 2 weeks notice. He asked me what I was going to do, and he literally laughed at me. So that's all I needed. That's all I needed. So I thrive on that. So the following day, I was sitting at my computer, and I made a resume, and I was just shooting it out to anyone. At the time, there were only about 5 craft breweries in the state, so there wasn't a whole lot around here, and they'd been around for a while. I'd done my research. They didn't have a lot of employees. The first small craft brewery had just opened, and that was Relic Brewing Company. He was doing it on his own. He wasn't going to hire anybody. So I shot my resume all around the country. I'm a home brewer. I want to get my foot in the door, and nobody responded. So it was a little defeating. I did get one call back from a brewery down in North Carolina. They said they would bring me down to work on the sales team, but knowing my personality, I didn't think I'd make a good salesperson. I'm a little kind of quiet and shy and reserved, so I didn't want to go that route. And then I ended up getting a call from Long Trail up in Vermont. So I went up there and I met with their master brewer. at the time was Mike Gerhardt. He had just taken on the job. He left Dogfish Head, went to Long Trail. He's now the head brewer at Hill Farmstead Brewing Company in Vermont. So I met with him, and he showed me around the brewery, and he's like, "Are you sure you don't want to be a brewer? Like, you seem to have a little bit of knowledge around the brew house and stuff like that." I said, "I don't know what I want to do." And I think because I wasn't really sure of what path I wanted to go down, I didn't get the job, so I was back to the drawing board. So I came back home and trying to figure out where I want to go, and the apartment I was living in West Hartford was owned by the owner of Thomas Hooker Brewing Company in Bloomfield. So I can be a little stubborn. So I was like, I don't want to ask him for a job. It seems too easy. I want to do this on my own, but no one was hiring, so I didn't have a choice. So I just swallowed my pride, and I called Kurt up and said, I don't have a lot of experience, but I'll come and work for free or whatever I have to do. And that was pretty much the path I took. Sold my car, canceled the cable, moved to a cheaper apartment, and I rode my bike to the brewery every single day for a year to work on the load. First clean kegs. I cleaned probably 100 to 150 kegs a day, all by myself, and then got promoted to the shipping department, shipping and receiving. I'll say department. I was the only one doing it. I got the job because someone else left the company to do something else. So I did that for a while, started working or managing all the orders for distribution, filling kegs, all that stuff. And then from there, I decided, I really enjoy being in the brewery. I would love to get on the brew house. So I had never touched commercial brewing equipment before, but I would go home at night and read all the books and try to educate myself as much as possible. So Kurt was nice enough to let me train with the head brewer there at the time, Jay Ramos. He's a former brewer from Shipyard Brewing Company up in Maine. So the great thing about that was, I'm getting my foot in the door, and I could learn exactly what not to do, because the stuff that I was learning there, while I got to learn the basics, I could tell that everything wasn't getting done necessarily the right way. And I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, because things have totally changed there. This was a very long time ago, but it was a great learning experience. And I mentioned the Siebel Institute earlier. Kurt was nice enough to pay for my education at the Siebel Institute. So once someone had faith in me, I was all in at that point. That's really all it took. So I was on the road to becoming a professional brewer, as they call it. So I think throughout that whole process, one of the things I learned was that the bottom bullet points, he's seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. When you have a goal and you have a dream, it's very broad. And once you have a focus and you need to come up with incremental goals. So that's why a business plan is so important, or just sitting down and putting your thoughts down on paper, however it may be, is you come up with this timeline of goals, and as you achieve each one, you start to build confidence. You get over the fear of opening up your own business, because it's extremely scary. There's so much riding on the line, especially if you have a family and children, and all the bills and a mortgage and all that stuff. It's really scary, but you start with small goals, and you achieve it, you get some confidence, and you keep working. And at the end of every goal, you see that light at the end of the tunnel. It might be just like a little pinhole in the beginning, but it gets brighter and brighter, and it gets really exciting throughout the process. So, just want to get you guys thirsty. So, it's actually a picture of our flagship beer. We do a lot of German-style beers. It's not all we do, but it's definitely German-style beers are a passion of mine. I feel that they're the hardest beers to make. You can't hide mistakes in those beers. So this is our Golden Messenger Kolsch. It's a traditional German ale, native to the Cologne region of Germany. So we brew it traditionally. We use 2 malts. We use a Cologne yeast, German Cologne yeast. Very light, clean, and crisp. Runs about 4.8%. So they have it on at Plan B around the corner. I just had one, so it tastes really good. So at the end of the night, I have some free beer tokens to hand out to everybody, so you guys can come on into the tap room and try one for yourself. Or if that doesn't float your boat, we have beers for everybody. So about Hog River Brewing Company. So we're a brewery and tap room. We're located in the Parkville neighborhood of Hartford, Connecticut, in the West End, bordering the West Hartford line. We're a 7-barrel brewery. 7 barrels, or a barrel in the brewing world is 31 gallons. So our brew lengths are approximately 247 gallons per brew. So we have a 3-vessel brew house, we have a hot liquor tank, we have a mash tun, and we have a brew kettle. It's all steam driven. We invested in a steam boiler to fire all of our equipment instead of natural gas or direct fire. We just thought that it was a little better for the beer. A little more expensive, but I won't get into all that. But if anyone's interested in actually, equipment costs and stuff like that, we can talk about it after. So going with a 7-barrel brew house, we thought that when we opened, the goal was to sell pretty much 80-90% of our beer right in our tap room. So we thought by having a 7-barrel brew house, we'd be able to achieve that goal while still distributing a small amount of beer out in the market. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but we're pretty much hitting those numbers right now. So we're probably around 90% of our beer right, and it's selling directly right in the tap room, whether it's beer in a pint or cans or growlers to go, whatever it may be, but about 90%. Outside of the brew house, we have 7-barrel fermenters. We started with 3, we're up to 7. And then in our walk-in cooler, we have, as of yesterday, 8 7-barrel serving tanks. So we took a different approach. A lot of production breweries might have fermenters and then a bright tank, which you package out of. I knew when we were opening, I'd be doing everything all by myself, the brewing, the cellaring, the packaging, you name it, I was doing it. So I set our brewery up for efficiency for one person. So I ended up putting, at the time when we opened 2 years ago, 5 7-barrel serving tanks in the cooler. So instead of transferring a beer from the fermenter into the serving tank, and then from the serving tank into kegs, I eliminated the kegs. I just hooked the serving tanks directly up to my draft system and poured directly out of the tanks. And then when the tanks get low, when there's only maybe a barrel left in the tanks, I move it into kegs and then fill the tanks back up. So that way I can get more beers on draft. So it definitely makes things a little easier for my work schedule. What makes Hog River different than all the other 6,000 breweries in the United States right now? It's a tough question to answer because I feel like probably all 6,000 breweries draw some parallels in one way or another. I think what separates Hog River is, some of the risks we've taken, one being the neighborhood that we're in. We decided early on we were going to go into a neighborhood and help revitalize the entire neighborhood. And only 2 short years in, that's exactly what we're doing. There's other entrepreneurs coming into the Parkville neighborhood and opening businesses. There's people moving into Parkville now. We're generating foot traffic on the street. There's a lot of money being invested in Parkville now that people weren't willing to invest 2 years ago. We're Hartford history buffs, and we know what Hartford was, and we want to see it get back there again, and we're extremely passionate about it. So, outside of having, goals for our brewery, we also have a larger goal for the city and how we can, really help the city along and be a part of the city on a larger scale. Also, the quality of our product. That's extremely important to me. There's a lot of breweries that open up, not only in the state of Connecticut, it's anywhere. I've traveled all around, not only in the United States, but to other countries, drinking beer and from new breweries, and even breweries that have been around a long time. And there's a lot of quality issues in beer out there right now. And some of that's lack of experience. Some of it, is just people looking to get into the beer industry as a get-rich-quick scheme, and it doesn't work that way. Unless you're, Budweiser, there's just not a lot of money to be had. When someone told me that early on, I thought they were full of it, but I learned pretty quick. So, not to say that there's not money down the road, but it takes a little while. So, the quality of our beer, we spend a lot in lab equipment. We buy higher end pH meters and flow meters and higher end microscopes and stuff like that to make sure that the beer we're putting out in the market or even into our tap room is the highest quality beer that we can make. You know, when we opened the doors initially, I didn't think we'd have the budget for that for a while, and maybe we still don't, but it's a sound investment and it pays back, because all it takes is one customer coming into your tap room and tasting one off flavor in your beer, and they're not going to come back again, even though it may have been something that just showed up that day, or you know, maybe the brewer taproom manager hadn't found that off flavor yet, you know, so we could take it off draft. You know, there's so many variables, but you know, you need to make sure, especially in this crowded market, you're making the best beer possible. It's the most important thing right now. So, I already touched on the location in Parkville. You know, going beyond just, you know, Parkville, our building's quite unique. I know a few people have been in our tap room before, but we're in an extremely historic neighborhood. Our neighborhood was built up by Albert Pope. He started Pope Manufacturing. He invented the first electric car, Columbia bicycle, and before all that, he made wheels for horse-drawn carriages. So the Parkville neighborhood down into Pope Park and Frog Hollow was a major transportation hub for the entire United States pre-Henry Ford. Albert Pope was just a little bit ahead of his time. So his business neighbor, Hartford Rubber Works, invented the pneumatic tire. That's what we all drive on today. So Pope bought out Hartford Rubber Works, and he erected the building that we're located in, and they use it to manufacture wheels and tires. So what we have here is one of the gears of the hammer presses that's still in our tap room. We have two of these in our tap room. This picture doesn't do them justice, but they're, this room that these two machines are in is, the roof is 32 feet high. These machines are about 24 feet high. They're 12 feet wide, and that's just above ground. They actually go 20 feet down in the ground as well. There's massive springs buried. So these are old hammer presses. They hammered the rims, or the metal, to make the rims to hold the tires. And then across the street, where there's a nonprofit, Hands on Hartford, that's where the warehouse where they stored all the wheels and tires. And behind that, there's a big concrete structure you can see from 84. It says Spaghetti Warehouse on the top, and it looks like it's going to fall to the ground any minute. That's the power plant, steam power plant, that provided steam to all the factory buildings. When they built that, that was the most advanced power plant in the entire world. So it's still standing. All the buildings are protected by the National Register of Historic Places, so you can't tear them down. If someone wants to rehab them, there's tax credits available. Fortunately, ours have been rehabbed already, so we could just lease space in there, but there are other Pope manufacturing buildings at the end of the street that they're looking to rehab. So it's really an up-and-coming neighborhood. We were happy to preserve a piece of history. I don't know how much these things weigh. If I had to guess, probably anywhere 50 to 70 tons. I can tell you that one of the hammers was still in the machine when we signed the lease, and we had to hire some riggers to take it out. The press in the machine alone weighed 12,000 pounds. So they're pretty impressive. So we had to rehab these. We had to degrease them and repaint them and jackhammer up all the concrete floors around them and pour new floors, and it took about 3 months. So I'm pretty proud of them. They're impressive. So starting a business, just kind of, you know, I think some of these bullet points apply to just opening a business in general, not necessarily a craft brewery. So for me, it was extremely important to gain valuable experience. I don't have a lot of patience. Most entrepreneurs probably don't. They just want to get things done and, you know, just jump in and figure it out as you go. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. And my wife was like, no way. Like, you know, step back and think about this. You're going to go out and get money, and we're going to do this the right way. You're just not going to jump in and do it willy-nilly. It makes no sense. There's too much riding on the line. So, you know, that's kind of, you know, when I was convinced I need to leave my insurance job and actually go work somewhere and just see the inner workings of a brewery, because, you know, without getting in there and seeing the day-to-day, there's no way you would ever know until the first day you open your own brewery, and then you're scrambling. Because the day you open your brewery, you have so many things that you have to take care of, you know. Payroll, you know, finding insurance for your employees, whatever it may be, you know, just paying the bills. You know, I had no idea it would take me like 10 hours a week to pay all the bills. I was clueless. So, you know, until I got into the industry, I was able to see actually what it takes. And I learned the bulk of that when I was the head brewer at Willimantic Brewing Company. I was the head brewer there for 5 years, and the owner, David Wallner, was extremely helpful in helping us get Hog River open. He was an open book, and every day I would go in and he would just open his books up and show me his old business plan and give me really let me do whatever I wanted with his supervision. And without him, I don't think the brewery would be where it is. I don't think we ever would have got the doors open. So we owe him a lot. But finding your niche, whatever your business is, what path do you want to go down? Every business segment, there's different avenues you can go down. What avenue do you want to go down? That applies to a brewery too. There's breweries that open up and they just do strictly production. There's breweries that open up and they're only taproom sales with no distribution. So, whatever your business is, finding out exactly what path you want to go and staying true to it and try not to deviate from it, especially in the planning stages. And then jump in and don't look back. I kind of alluded to or mentioned earlier about setting goals and a timeline, achieving those goals, and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. If you're going to be scared at first, that's just natural because you're taking such a huge risk. But if you turn around and look back, then you're going to go backwards. So you just need to keep looking forward and get over the fear. Don't let the fear stop you. It's really easy. You're going to sit in bed at night and you're like, oh my God, I'm taking this project on, and what if nobody comes the first day? What if I don't get any clients? Whatever it may be. But if you put the hard work in and do your due diligence, those people are going to be there and they'll see your hard work and they'll support you for it. So, and a business plan is extremely important. I wouldn't say that the business plan is going to be the end-all be-all of your business. I have not, and you're probably going to hear this from any entrepreneur, any business owner. I haven't opened my business plan up once. I think this is the first time I pulled it out since I gave it to a bank like 4 years ago. But if anything, I think the most important part about writing a business plan is that it gets your mind going. It gets you exploring different avenues. It gets you to investigate and research everything, and that's the most important thing to research all avenues. Because if you don't do that, if you leave some stones unturned, then you're doing yourself a disservice. So take the time and write a business plan and do your financials and do all the research that you can. It's extremely time consuming. You might have to rewrite it 15 times, which I had to do. But it was frustrating at times. But if you do it right the first, not the first time, you're not going to, but if you put the time and effort into it, you'll be in good shape. Then location, licensing, funding, and equipment. That can be daunting again, no matter what your business is. Even if you're going out and you're buying computers or have to buy licensing to sell a product, whatever it may be. It's a daunting process, but your business plan, if you're doing it the right way, you should be able to, account for any surprises and keep you moving in the right direction. Then you get to a build out. Whenever the build out can be quite stressful too. We had a ton of issues with our build out, especially being in a historic building. You can plan, I guess they say, plan for the worst, because it's probably going to happen, especially if you're building out a brick and mortar. We had holes under the concrete floors, hidden rooms under the floors, all kinds of stuff. Our opening was delayed 6 to 8 months because of all the surprises during build out and dealing with landlords and bank loans and stuff like that. So it takes a little time and patience. And as you're going through the process, like I said before, you can't look back. You have to keep looking forward, because no one's going to make the path easy for you. You just have to keep moving. And then finally, if you keep moving forward and dot all the I's and cross the T's, you're going to get your doors open. And because you put in all that hard work, people will be there. So, starting a brewery. This is our brew house. Now that I look at it, it looks kind of intimidating, but it's not that bad. So on this vessel here, this is our hot liquor tank. That's all of our brewing water. We feed city water into it. and then we heat it up to brew beer with and to clean with. The middle vessel with the door in the front, that's our mash tun. That's where we mix all the grain with water to make a mash and extract fermentable sugars. And then on the right, we have our boil kettle. That's where we boil the beer. And then right in front of it, in the corner, that's our heat exchanger. So that's where we cool the beer down on the way to the fermenter before pitching yeast into it. And then on this side of the brewery, we have all of our fermenters. So this was actually taken before we even opened the doors. It's not that clean anymore, unfortunately. So we try, but it's difficult. So starting a brewery, the most important thing for us, not the most important thing, but it was extremely important for us to find the right location. I mean, that's important with any, retail business. You need to go to a place or a location where people are going to come, obviously, or else you're not going to pay the bills. But I don't know. I guess I like to do things the hard way. We opened in a neighborhood where there was no business going on, so but that was all part of our goal. Put a little extra stress on us not knowing if people would feel safe coming down into our neighborhood, because historically Parkville has a bad rap, especially Park Street. We decided we were going to throw caution in the wind and just go for it, and primarily because we saw what was about to happen in Parkville. When you walk the streets, you could feel there was like a little pulse on the ground. You could tell something really good was about to happen. So we thought we would take the risk and go for it. And if we were one of the first companies down there to plant our feet, other people would come. So we thought we would take that risk. And a lot of breweries go and open up in industrial parks and old garages and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. People are going to travel and find your beer if you're making good beer. There's no doubt about it. But we wanted a lot of character. We wanted people to come into our tap room and see the history. And we dub our tap room Hartford's living room, because we're very diverse and eclectic tap room. People come in, they feel at home, they sit down, they enjoy the beer. In the winter, they bring crock pots and plug them into the wall and eat chili all day and drink beer. And we partner with the food trucks, and people just really enjoy their time with us. So. To have enough space for all the customers to come and sit and enjoy their time with us was very important. And most breweries open up with a very small tap room. They might be able to sit 20, 30 people. We want to go the whole other direction. We made a very small brewery, and then we can seat about 100 people in our tap room, a standing room. We can do 175 to 200. So, and I'm glad we did, because we can fill it up. So going to the business plan and financials, like I mentioned, the business plan for us was an extremely long process. We looked at probably 25 different locations. We started looking in Hartford. I got extremely frustrated with the process of opening a business in Hartford. The building, the style of building that we want to open our brewery in, they just don't exist in Hartford anymore. They're all torn down. They're all parking lots now. If you go downtown, the old historic buildings don't really exist. They used to be all along Bushnell Park and on Capitol Ave, and they're not there anymore, but they are in Parkville. And we had found a location in Parkville, actually right across the street, about 3 years before we opened, and we had a lease signed, and unfortunately the owner sold the building right after we signed the lease, so we were back to the drawing board, and we're trying to find other locations in Parkville, but we just couldn't find it. So we looked all over. I looked all around Simsbury here. We looked in Canton. We looked up in New Hartford at the Ovation Factory. We were out in Southington. We were in Bristol. We were everywhere, but we just couldn't find the right spot. So one day I ventured back into Parkville and walked into the building we were in. I saw this door like in the back corner, and I was like, this kind of looks like a shady door, but I want to see what's behind it. And I opened it up and I peeked in. I saw the shadow of those big machines, and it just like, this is where it caught my eye. And I walked in, and I think there's like one swinging light bulb and holes in the floor you can't even walk on. And I was like, this is the place. This is the place. So the business plan, because of the space we were going into, it was extremely important that we did all of our planning, because it was going to cost a lot of money to get this place built out. Our space was 2 units with a wall right down the middle. So I'll skip ahead to the next slide really quick. But this is a portion of our tap room. So you can see this column right here in the far one. there was a wall dividing 2 units, all coming right down the middle of those columns. So one side had been occupied for about 15 years by a curtain manufacturer. And this side, where the mural is, that space hadn't been occupied since the 1940s. So that's where the swinging light bulb was. And actually that door was right here. And I came in, and then there's an opening here, and there's another one next to it. This is an old freight elevator shaft. So this is the elevator door, and then right here you have the floor registers that indicate floors 1 through 5. So that was all boarded up and looked pretty gnarly. This wall came straight down here. So, going in there, I think the first time I brought my wife in, she like looked at me like I was crazy. She literally started crying immediately. She's like, this is never going to happen. But I had a vision for it, and that's one of those things, like, people are going to tell you that you can't do it, and they're not going to tell you that they don't have faith in you, but that might, it's not expressed that way. But people are going to say, oh, your idea is crazy. There's too many breweries opening. There's, not enough people drinking craft beer, whatever it may be. But if this is your dream and your passion, then you go for it. But this is the vision I had, and it came to fruition. But so. Going back to the business plan, that's why it's so extremely important. So like I said, I rewrote this about 15 times because we looked at all those different locations, and for every location I had to rewrite this business plan for the demographics, the financials for that space, and everything that came along with that location, because no 2 areas were the same. So going back and doing all the digging on demographics and taxes in that town, and whether or not that town was even zoned to have a craft brewery, because the reality is a lot of towns aren't. A lot of the zoning laws, they're older, so they just don't have anything for craft breweries or a tap room and brewery, whatever it may be. And sometimes the people in town and city governments don't understand exactly what a brewery and tap room is, so you really have to go and convince them that people aren't coming in your tap room and drinking all night and leaving and killing families and by drunk driving and stuff like that. The people that come into our tap rooms are actually, quite responsible, and they come for 1 or 2 beers and they go home for the night and take a 4-pack with them. So not to say that someone doesn't sit down and have too many beers, but that's our job to monitor and to make sure they don't get in their car or, tell them that they can't have any more to drink. But so getting into the funding of the brewery, there's a million different avenues you could take, and it's really not that much different than opening up any other business. But obviously some businesses are more expensive to open than others. Even after working in the brewing industry for about 7 years before opening here, I had an idea of what all the equipment costs and stuff like that. I had no idea about build out and construction costs and stuff like that. So when it came to funding, we ended up getting a bank loan to fund all of our brewing equipment. The reality is the bank wants collateral, so they're not going to give you money for building tables, or probably tables, but putting a mural on the wall and pouring new concrete floors, and especially in someone else's space, it's not going to be there. So we ended up getting a small business loan through the SBA for all of our brewing equipment. It was still a little tricky because we knew how much money we needed to get the brewing equipment that we knew we needed to make the beer that we thought we would sell. Unfortunately, the bank cut our ask short by about $50,000, so we had to sacrifice some of our fermenters. And what the bank said was that you've never operated a business before, this is what we're comfortable giving you, but we'll give you a line of credit. So if you really want those tanks, you can use a line of credit, which had like an astronomical interest rate to it. So, they're playing their game too. So, we decided we were just going to open with those 3 fermenters and make a go of it and see what happens. We were running out of beer after the first weekend of opening, but if you plan right, you can do things pretty bare bones. So, just means you have to work a lot of hours. But if you're going to open a business, you're doing that anyway. So. So in terms of the funding, private versus bank, we did a blend of both. So we worked with family and friends. We did a Kickstarter campaign and the bank loan. So when it was all said and done, I think we did a pretty good job getting our space built out with all considering a fairly small budget. we got the whole thing done for about $500,000. So considering, all the issues we ran into, and the type of brewing setup we installed with the steam and the steam piping and all that stuff. I mean, keep in mind our space had one swinging light in it, so we had to do all of our own electrical. We had to do all the plumbing. Because of the small budget, I couldn't afford to hire a general contractor. I met with several, but on a $500,000 job, they want 20% of that, and I just wasn't willing to do it. So I went home at night and I read up on building code. So I did the whole thing myself. So I GC'd the whole project. I found all the contractors on my own. I worked with them, worked with an architect on the blueprints, but the blueprints we basically did as a design build. So instead of having everything on the blueprint exactly where it's going to go, we told the city that we're going to start building out, and as we go through the build out process, we're going to decide where things are going to go. So that worked out pretty well for us, and then doing it that way, we could determine what things we really need and what things we don't need. So some of the stuff we decided to leave out, stuff like USB ports under the bar and some of that stuff. And, we put outlets under the bar and nobody really uses them, but it's a convenience for people. The electrical stuff is just so expensive, so we really cut back there. Partners versus no partners, that's like a huge question. So, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to it. It all depends on how you want to go into your business. I think you need to take a deep look into who you are as a person to determine whether or not you want a business partner, no matter who it is, whether it's your significant other or a friend or family member. It's going to put a lot of stress on your relationship. So the way we set up Hog River is actually my wife owns the bulk of it. She was still working her job at Cigna at the time. We thought it would take about 5 years for her to come on full time, but she was kind of skeptical. She didn't know how well we would work together. So it's just a whole different ball game. But she's working with us full time now, and we learn more about each other every day. So it's fun. So my wife Joy is my business partner, and then our family and friends. We structured deals with 4 other people where they gave us a loan, and we gave them a percentage of equity. So as it turns out, Joy and I own 88% of Hog River Brewing Company, and we sold 12% with the option to buy it back whenever we want. So we're looking to do that sooner than later. Instead of going out and finding random people to invest in our business, we decided to go to family and friends, people that we can trust. And fortunately for us, the people we found are people who have money already. So they really believe in us. It wasn't necessarily like we wanted to invest in Hog River Brewing Company to get $1 million back down the road. They knew how long we've been working on this and how passionate we are about it, that they wanted to see this succeed. And that was the big thing. So finding those people that believe in you and your goal and your dream and get them to back you. Not necessarily the business, but to back you. So, that worked for us. That might not work for everybody. I have a lot of friends that open brewing companies. Sometimes, a bank loan's the only way to go. Sometimes just finding, people with money who you don't know, sometimes that's the only way to go. And, if you really want to open your brewing company, then you need to do whatever's possible. But just make sure you work with attorneys and accountants to make sure that everything's structured the right way. If I could go back, I'd probably do a few things differently. I don't think we're set up in a bad way, but I'd probably, restructure a couple of things. And I think one of the things, because we didn't have a large budget, I didn't have the money to work with, a bunch of attorneys and accountants and stuff like that. So I took so much on my own plate to do all the research and figure out how to do things and research investor agreements and stuff like that. So, but if you do something that's not perfect, there's always a way to fix it. So even down the road, at least you hope. But depends how bad the mistake is, I guess. But so finding brewing equipment, there's a million brewing equipment manufacturers out there now. Everybody's getting into it. 5-6 years ago, there there weren't even that many. It was just the larger manufacturers. We went with American Beer Equipment. They're out of Lincoln, Nebraska. So I went with them because the day we launched our website in 2013, they started calling me. And I was like, I'm like years away from getting the doors open. They're like, all right, we'll call you back in a couple of years. They called me every month for 2 years. So I was like, when it came time to buying brewing equipment, you know, and the calls weren't just like, oh, buy our beer equipment. It was like, how are things coming along? It was like genuine conversation. They wanted to come out and see the build out. And I was like, these are great people. So, and they were priced right too. So they manufacture all their equipment in China, and then they bring it back to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they inspect it and polish all the welds and make sure that it meets their standards. So most of the brewing equipment now is being built in China no matter what. So it's just so much cheaper. You can buy American-made equipment. You can buy equipment made in Canada. There's probably a 15% premium on that equipment. So, you know, I think if I had the money in the beginning, I probably would have went all American. That would have been my goal, but we just didn't have that in the budget up front. So depending on the size of your system, you know, you're going to look to spend a pretty significant amount of your budget on brewing equipment. A 7-barrel system, brand new, you know, the way we set up for day one, you're going to spend anywhere from $160,000 to $200,000, and that doesn't include the installation. That doesn't include the steam boiler, the steam piping, any of that stuff. So it's a big chunk of change. The steam boiler itself, we bought a Columbia steam boiler. Their sales rep is out of Massachusetts. Columbia is known to make high-end steam boilers for brewing companies. They make steam boilers for a Harpoon Brewing Company up in Mass. They make anything from, you know, 400,000 BTU like we have up to, you know, millions. So, but even on a 400,000 BTU steam boiler, you're looking to spend about $25,000 on that alone. And then probably, you know, another 40 to 50 to get all your steam piping installed. So it's significant investment. Contractors and licensing. The contractors, you know, if you're working with a general contractor, they're probably going to have some people that you can work with. It's hard to find contractors that know how to install brewing equipment. There's a few more of them now than there were, you know, 7, 8, 9 years ago. The contractors that I hired had never installed a brew house before. So I sat with them and I actually drew everything out. So I knew how I wanted it to look. I knew where I wanted everything laid out. So I designed all the water piping, all the steam piping, everything, and then they came in and you know, executed everything. So you can save money by doing things that way. It takes a little longer. So we got lucky with our contractors. Electricians too. The electricians are extremely expensive, which I mentioned before. If you can find the right company, maybe somebody who's just getting going, you know, you can strike a deal. They're all slow, so you know, if you have a 6-month time frame, you hear it all the time. Just double it, just to be safe, because it's going to happen. Because what happens with these contractors, and if you have a house, you've seen it too. They'll come into work for a couple days and they'll leave, and then they'll go work another job. The same thing's going to happen to your brewery. They're going to put, you know, right in the beginning, they're going to put like 4 guys on the job, and you're like, oh man, we're really cranking along, we're going to make some progress. And then you don't see them for a week, and you're calling and you're cursing them, and where are you? I got everything riding on this. And they're like, yeah, whatever, I got everything riding on my company too. So, you know, it's trying to find a balance, but takes a lot of time and patience, so plan for that. And then, you know, the build out, like I was just talking about, it's a stressful process because you're going to run into problems. There's a million issues, and you can't prepare for them all. So, you know, I'll tell you one of the issues we had when we were building out. So around those machines I was talking about, when we signed the lease, the floors were the original concrete from the 1920s. It's because that area had never been occupied before. It had just gotten beat up over the years, and like frost heave and all this stuff because it was slab on grade, and the concrete was like jagged like this. You can't even walk on it. So we had to go in and take all the concrete out. Around the machines, there were these big 20-foot concrete, like 4 concrete walls with big springs in there. They're so deep, groundwater was coming up through them. There's grease and oil dripping off these machines. I mean, it was a complete disaster. So we made the decision to jackhammer up all the concrete that we could where it was slab on grade. And as we're jackhammering, where the brewery is right now, the concrete's disappearing and falling into the floor. And we're trying to figure out what's going on, so we kept jackhammering. We actually found a hidden room under the floor. So the hidden room was 18 feet long, 9 feet wide, and 24 feet deep. And it was 4 concrete walls. Nothing had ever been in there before. It looked like it was just built, a week ago. So we're looking down in there and like, what do? We can't put our brew house on top of this. So we brought a structural engineer out, and he's looking at it and he's doing whatever his calculations are. He's like, don't worry about it, fill it in. So we're like, all right. So we start bringing in dump trucks of fill and putting them in the parking lot, and they're bobcatting them in. And over the course of 3 days, they're filling this hole up. I'm like, all right, we're almost there. We're gonna pour concrete on this, and we're off to the races. So I go home for the night, and I come in the next morning. There's a door in the brewery, and I walk in, and I'm looking at what I thought was going to be a massive hole full of dirt. All the dirt was gone. And I'm looking down into the parking garage under the building. The wall that separates the hole from the parking garage totally blew out. So all the fill had gone into the parking garage. And I'm just looking down in there, and 2 guys are looking back up at me. And I'm like, I won't say what I said to them, but they just said, no comprende, and they walked away. And I was like, what's going on here? And so I got the building owner on the phone, obviously, and we had to go through a whole process of making the floor structural to hold our brewing equipment. And the thing about that that made it a little more difficult was that, fortunately we got the building owner to pay for it, because if I had to pay for it, we never would have got the doors open, and I'd probably go back to insurance to pay the investors back, because I'd already spent all their money. But yeah, I forgot my train of thought. But that was a huge nightmare. The building owner took care of it. We were very lucky. And unfortunately he did, because that was the only area where we could actually install our brewery in our entire taproom space, because we have these massive columns. There's just nowhere else for it to go. So we lucked out, and ironically we just signed another 3,000 square feet of space in the unit behind us, and they only fixed the portion of that hole that's under the brewery. So when I signed the new lease, the rest of that hole is in our new unit. So I had to go back to him, and I was like, you got to fix this. And fortunately he did. At least we knew what was there this time. It wasn't a surprise. So there's always going to be something. So some close friends of mine are building a new brewery. It's an existing brewery, but they went through the whole process with the town, and the town actually courted them to come. They're like, oh, we can't wait to have you. We're going to give you all these benefits and da-da-da. And they started building the new brewery. And then come to find out, once they started to build it up, they're getting ready to put the new brewing equipment in. The new inspector came out, brand new inspector. Your foundation isn't, the proper concrete to hold this building. They had to take the building back down and go back and re-pour the foundation. So there's always something, and you just can't account for it. There's always going to be something. So, when you start in a town, maybe the building inspector, you make fast friends with them and you go and have a beer with them. But then, hey, maybe he gets a new job, and the new person that comes in, maybe they don't like beer. Maybe they don't want a brewing company in the town. They're going to make it hard for you. So there's a lot of variables out there. But again, you just keep fighting through them, and you find a way. If you're motivated, you'll find a way to do it. The licensing process for us, it was a long process. So to open a brewing company, you need federal licensing through the Tax and Trade Bureau. You need state licensing through the State Liquor Commission. You have to get your TTB licensing before you get your state licensing. You can't do them at the same time, so you have to plan for that as well. TTB licensing, it's a beast in itself. I've heard it's gotten better. We hired an attorney out of St. Louis, Missouri, who works specifically with the TTB to take care of our license. So, we interviewed them on the phone, and they said, oh, we'll get you your license in worst case scenario, 2 months. Like, we have all the connections there. The guy that owns the law firm, he was on general counsel for Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis. He's like, we know everybody, we'll take care of you. So, we paid him, and it still took 6 months. So, you just never know. It really depends on where you are in the queue and who your personal reviewer is for your application. The person that was reviewing our application, she requested stuff that none of my friends had to do. So you just never know. She was requesting stuff from our investors, personal bank statements that I was uncomfortable asking for, and it was frustrating. And then one of the things we ran into as well is that our bank loan, they put conditions on the bank loan to say that they weren't going to give us the money for the brewing equipment until we got our TTB license. Well, it wasn't going to work that way. The bank basically set us up for failure, so we had to go back and renegotiate the terms on our bank loan so we could get the brewing equipment there and start installing it just so we can get the doors open on time. So as you're going along, there's always things that jump out, but you can plan ahead, but there's going to be something, but just make sure you're flexible and you'll find the right path. So when it was all said and done, our licensing between federal and state, it took about 7.5, almost 8 months. We started it pretty early in the process. The state licensing, it's a lot quicker. You can file your state paperwork, and then you can get what's called a provisional license. So the provisional license would allow you to at least make beer once all your equipment's installed. So you can at least get beer in the tanks. You just can't sell it. So you can start to pilot batch and stuff like that. You pay a little more for it for the provisional license. If you don't use it, they tell you that they'll refund you. So may or may not be true. So, but so yeah, plan for that. I've heard of some people getting their federal licensing recently within a month or two. So you just never know. But again, always plan for the worst and hope for the best. And opening the doors, it's the best day. We didn't know what to expect the first day we opened. We thought maybe we'd get like 30, 40 people in and enjoy a couple beers. And we opened at noon on a Saturday. We had 2 lines going out the door for 9 hours straight. And we went through probably, in the first weekend, probably 24 barrels of beer. We opened up the following Wednesday, I think, with 1 beer on tap. And it was extremely rewarding. It was stressful because while it's going on, like I never worked on a point of sale system before, and the morning we were opening, I was like, oh my God, I just realized I have to go to the bank and get change. Like it never crossed my mind. So rushing around that morning and doing all that stuff, and the doors open and the people are coming, and more and more come, and we had 3 food trucks there and they're busy. Like, all right, all this hard work, it's paying off, and you get emotional. It's pretty cool. And then you have like the first couple months and you stay busy, and it starts to slow down a little bit because you're not like the new cool kid on the block anymore. But if you're doing things the right way, they come back and they keep coming. So I know it's 7 o'clock, so if anyone, I have a few more slides. If anyone has to leave, I'm not going to be offended. So growing a brewery, we have our 2-year anniversary coming up August 20th. So I guess, I'd like to think we're kind of in growth phase right now. And in all honesty, we're trying to figure that out because we had a 5-year plan, and we're pretty much at our 5-year plan. And, we were there at 1.5 years. So, a few words of wisdom: grow your savings as soon as possible. When you first open, you're not going to have all the bills that you have at 2 years. So, take all the money you're getting in your tap room and through distribution and sock away as much as you possibly can, and build that bank account because you're going to need it. Because I'll tell you, if you have a tap room, you're in the summertime, and it depends on your location. If you're at the beach like Stony Creek, that's your busy season. If you're in Hartford like us, you're going to slow down because people aren't giving up the beach in Rhode Island to come into Parkville to drink a beer. So it's just not going to happen. So you got to plan for that. And you'll see your bank account grow. Be smart about it. Resist the urge to go buy a bunch of cool equipment. Just sit on your money for a little while and see what happens. Try to figure out your direction early and stay nimble. When we first opened, we thought we'd make very specific styles of beer, and these are the styles of beer that I love making. And there's a market for them, and you can develop that niche, but you might find pretty fast that you need to adjust your product portfolio or the direction of your business pretty quick. So swallow your pride, get rid of the ego, listen to your customers, and remember that you're running a business. And a lot of times, even though you're running it for yourself because you want to run your business, you're running it for other people too. You're running it for the people that want to come and drink your beer. And if they're taking the time out of their schedule to come drink the beer that you made in your tap room, you should have some of the beers on that they want to drink, or else they're not going to come back. So, IPAs have always been popular. They're not going anywhere. I had a hard time swallowing that, but we're making every style of IPA now. So it pays the bills. What are you going to do? It's how business works. We still have the German beers, so they sell really, really well. But the IPAs get the people in the doors, and then they get a flight, and you get them drinking all the other beers as well. So again, invest back in your business early and often. So, but as I alluded to before, be smart about it. You might wake up one day and you're like, oh man, I have no beer in the tank. Like, I got to go buy 3 more tanks. Just wait a couple weeks. Don't do it. The tanks are expensive. And it's not only buying the tanks, it's getting them delivered. It's getting the riggers to take them off the trucks. It's getting them installed. Next thing you know, you have too many tanks for your glycol chiller. So now you have to buy a new $25,000 glycol chiller. So just hang tight, see what the trends of your business are going to be. It's probably safe to say for the first year, just sit back and see, how the business ebbs and flows, because you're going to find out what your busy season is. You're going to find out what your slow season is. And then around year 2, everything kind of starts to come together, because now your brand is out there and people know who you are and you have a reputation for making good beer. So now your slower months are going to start to turn into your average months, and then your busy months are going to turn into like, I can't keep up, I need to hire people. So just hang tight and try to go lean and mean in the beginning, and reinvest back when you can. This is kind of my personal approach on business. It's not everybody's, and it fits our business model, but grow with cash and avoid taking on tons of debt. I just think, especially in the brewing industry, you get yourself in way too much trouble taking on too much debt. The way the industry is going now, the larger brewing companies are having a very, very difficult time. And one of the reasons is they over-leveraged themselves. They took on so much debt to build East Coast breweries and West Coast breweries and everything in between. And now the whole market's trending towards small local brewing companies. People aren't buying these massive brands anymore. So people are going to the tap rooms and drinking the local beers. And that's why the small breweries are thriving. As a Green Flash, they have their Virginia brewery and their West Coast brewery, and they're in a world of hurt. Smutty Nose, they overextended themselves and went up on auction, and for auction, I think one of the issues there was they weren't nimble. They became too big, and they got stuck making certain styles of beer, and they weren't adjusting to what the consumer wants. So they spent a lot of money building that beautiful brewery too, and the restaurant, and some of it could have just been bad timing as well. You just never know. So bankroll that money and plan for emergencies as well. So again, like I just mentioned, don't overextend your business. Be smart about it. Employees, if anyone's operated a business before, manages people, employees, it's tough. We hired a brewer back in April. I didn't have time to make beer anymore. I was trying to do everything on my own. I couldn't do it anymore. So we hired a brewer. He came from California, and he's got a bunch of experience, and I needed to hire somebody who could just take the brewery over and run with it, because all my time now is spent running the company, paying the bills and answering emails and phone calls and everything else that goes along with it, and just trying to figure out how to grow the business. There's going to be a lot coming at you, and you need to kind of push all the junk aside and focus on what's important and follow your goal. But employees are extremely challenging. When we opened, like, all right, we're opening next week, and I have 1 employee. That's not going to cut it. So, we put a job description out there, and people come in, and you're like, whatever, you're hired, come help us. And that kind of bit us in the butt. We had to let go of 2 people within 6 months, not for like anything bad. It's just that they weren't good with customers. So customer service is so extremely important in this industry. And if somebody comes in the tap room and they have a poor experience, they can go right around the corner somewhere else, and then they're never coming back to your place. So, you know, the one thing with our employees that we're constantly harping on is customer service. And you can't make everybody happy, but you try. You know, it's hard in a world of, you know, reviews and, you know, Yelp reviews and Google reviews. It's brutal. It keeps us up at night. My wife does all that stuff, and it's extremely frustrating. But you know, people are like, oh, why do you worry about that stuff? You know, who cares about that? But that's where people go. You know, I do the same thing if we're on vacation. I want to find the best lobster shack. I'm going to go look for reviews. You know, and they do the same thing with breweries. So, you know, you need good reviews, and if you want good reviews, you need the right employees, and you need good beer and everything. So, and the last bullet point I think is extremely important. This is probably something that we failed at, knowing your end game. You know, you did all this work, and now you're open, and you're spending countless number of hours running your business. And, you know, for me, all of a sudden my daughter's 4.5 years old, and I see her, you know, maybe like 1 hour at night, if at all, during the day. And, you know, when you open a business, you're going to work a lot of hours, but now you're running a production facility. You know, even if you're just selling all the beer right in your tap room, it's a lot of work. For the first year, I was easily working 80 to 90 hours a week. I was exhausted, running myself into the ground. And when I got home to try to go to sleep, I really couldn't, because I was thinking about the business and the things we need to do, and, you know, how we're going to get to the next step where we can just hire people to help out. It takes some time, and it's stressful. So if you're going to put all that time and effort and energy into your business, you know, figure out how you want to get out of it too, because it can reel you in, and now you're stuck. And I've seen it time and time again at other brewing companies and other businesses. And your end game can be anything. It's not necessarily selling your brewery. Maybe your goal is just to support your family or make a living or whatever. And at the end of 20 years, you're going to shut it down, and that's it. That's fine if that's your end game, but have an idea of what that is right from the beginning. And it might change once you get going, but and there's nothing wrong with that either. So where we're going, and this picture just kind of shows where we're going to be trending as a company over the next few months. So we started canning beer in 16-ounce cans back in December, and that's kind of where the industry's going toward cans, and we're kind of directing our business that way as well. And there's a lot that goes into packaging that we're working on, but it's turning into a big part of our business. But so we're trying to build growth through on-premise sales. As I mentioned, we sell 90% of our beer right in our tap room. We have a small distribution business. We sell a lot of cans right out of our tap room. The important thing to us was to drive sales at the tap room because the margins are so great. It doesn't cost you a lot of money to make a 250-gallon batch of beer. A batch of Kolsch might cost $350, you know, to make. You know, the IPAs and New England IPAs are a lot more expensive, so the margins aren't as great. So again, you can use those beers to bring people in, but make your money on some of those other beers, you know, the lighter style beers. You know, that's why German beers are kind of nice. They don't require a lot of ingredients. So the margins are much better. I drafted some numbers that I can share with you just to kind of give you an idea. Let me find them. Kind of the difference between selling beer in your tap room and taking a distribution model. There's nothing wrong with the distribution model, but you'll see that you have to sell a lot more beer to keep your business going. So if you're going to run a distribution model, make that your focus, and then your tap room will kind of be your profit center. You make some money off that, because at least the old rule of thumb is, when I was coming up through, was that as a production brewery, you need to make about 5,000 barrels of beer a year to really make a living. That's a lot of beer. In Connecticut, there's not a lot of breweries making 5,000 barrels a year. You can put them on one hand. So, but in the tap room, one log of beer, it's approximately 42 pints, depending on what you're selling those beers for in your tap room. So if you sell that log to a bar or restaurant, you can sell it anywhere from about, you know, from a craft standpoint, $80 to $100 to a bar or restaurant. And it really depends on the bar or restaurant. And the bars and restaurants will dictate that price. I had a rude awakening because I thought like, oh, we don't do a lot of distribution and we could sell a log for $120. Well, no one was buying the beer. They're like, I don't care how good it is. You know, we'd have to sell 5-ounce pours in our bar and restaurant to even make our 30% or whatever it is margin that we want to make at our bar or restaurant. So, and unfortunately, like, you just can't call the distributors and be like, oh, what are you selling a log of beer for? They're not going to give you that information. So it's a little bit of trial and error. But so, you know, you can plug that number, that 80 to $100 per keg, per log of beer into your financials, and you can see how many logs you have to sell to pay your bills. But in your tap room, that same log selling anywhere between $5.50 per pint and $7.50 per pint is anywhere between $230 to $315 right in your tap room. So a seven barrel brew or serving tank. Let's see, that's 21 logs of beer. You can do the math on that. So you know, you're running 5 or 6 draft lines, and you're moving through a tank of beer every 3-4 weeks, you know, in your tap room. You should be able to support yourself. So let's see here. So yeah, limited distribution. I think we have about 30 draft accounts right now. It fluctuates. We have a sales guy that goes out 3 days a week. He splits time between sales and bartending so we can get some tip money. We spend most of our time around Hartford, West Hartford, trying to get draft lines. We have a few very regular customers who are good to us. Really the main point of distributing is to build the brand for us. It's not to make money on it. We probably lose money on it when it all comes down to it. It's really just to build the Hog River brand. So when people go to the bar or restaurant and they have a beer, they recognize our logo, and then, you know, the ultimate goal is to get them into our tap room to buy a couple pints of beer. So, and that way we can give them the full experience that we want to give them. You know, we can talk to them, we can talk about our beer. The beer is the freshest because it's coming from a tank to the tap, which is literally 5 feet away. And we're turning over tanks in our tap room all the time. So we're putting out 2 to 3 new beers a week in our tap room. So someone might be able to have our local 35 IPA at a local bar or restaurant, but then come to our tap room and drink one of the other 12 beers on tap, which range from sours to barrel-aged beers, whatever it may be. So we try to get people in that way. The distribution is nice because, you know, it is supplemental. So maybe you have a slow day in your tap room and you get 3 or 4 checks in the mail. You know, it definitely makes you feel a little better. So that's kind of nice. And we didn't really do any distribution for the first year. We just didn't have a way to do it. But going into year 2, we're doing a little more. We have a draft line at Dunkin' Donuts Park, so we're selling beer to the yard goats. So that's a nice little you know, source for us to turn tanks over and get beer out the door. We just started to distribute cans, so we're now in three different liquor stores in West Hartford, and looking to come to a few out this way as well. So it's exciting, it's stressful, it's not easy to get draft lines, but the tap room should be your, you know, in today's day and age, your main revenue source. We're also building out additional space in our tap room. I mentioned before, we just took over another 3,000 square feet. We're building that out for production and event space. It'll be cut right down the middle. We do a ton of events in our tap room, ranging from birthday parties to weddings, baby showers, you name it. We do yoga. We do a Christmas tree farm in the winter. So we really use those events as a way to get people into Parkville. Then once we get them there, to try our beer and to keep them coming back. So we didn't expect to do weddings and some, you know, rehearsal dinners and some of this stuff, but that industry is actually shifting too, where people want a laid back, you know, wedding environment. They want to eat off the food trucks, you know, they want a casual environment, and the brewery's perfect for that. So we did our first one a couple months ago, and we have a couple more on the books. The problem with the weddings is we usually have to close down to our customers, and they can't come in, and that kind of ticks people off. So taking over the additional space and building out event space, now we can kind of double dip a little bit. We can get the revenue from the tap room and then also from the events without closing down to the public. So we didn't expect events to really be any part of our business, but plan for it because people want to go to breweries and do things, especially in the winter months. It's like on Saturdays, we're double booked every Saturday for birthday parties. So, you know, the pricing on that, you figure it out. It's kind of trial and error, but it can be lucrative. managing demand as you get into it. If you're making good beer, people are going to want it. So it can be hard to manage because all of a sudden you're running out of beer and you think you need more equipment, but you have to put a lot of cash out there. And you have to figure out what your end game is going to be again, because you can keep buying more tanks, but now your brewery's becoming more expensive to operate. And because it's more expensive to operate, now you have to sell more beer. Where are you going to sell more beer? Because all the breweries are selling more beer. So that pipeline's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So if you're going to take on all this debt and keep making, installing more and more tanks, make sure that you'll be able to sell that beer, because you're going to end up in trouble if you can't. There's always different avenues you can take. You could start contract brewing or something like that to fill the pipeline, but that's a whole different ball game. Some other things you could do, if you don't have enough beer in your tap room, you can work with another brewery to make beer for you. There are breweries out there that have extra capacity right now, so that's always an option too. There's plenty of breweries who have started that way. Used to be a very negative, like 10 years ago, like if you started your brewery contract brewing, like everybody looked down upon you, like, oh, that possibly can't make good beer, but it's totally different now. There's tons of Connecticut brands that are contract brewing, and lots of brands that have their own brewery who have beer made at other breweries just to fill the pipeline. So it's a good way to do it without spending all that money on additional equipment. And again, figuring out your direction and end game, I can't stress that enough. We didn't put any thought into that when we opened Hog River Brewing Company. I just thought, I love making beer. This is my life. It's all I do. It's like, it consumes my life 100%. I'm just going to do this forever. And then 2 years in, you're like, man, I'm tired. And, I still love making beer when I get a chance to do it. But now I'm running a business. And you get to see the other side of the beer business. It's one thing when you're sitting at a bar having a pint of beer. It's different when you're sitting in your brewery every day and you're fielding calls from different people and working with vendors. And it's just a whole other ball game. So be prepared for that as well. I'm not going to say that I don't like the beer industry. I still love it. I can't get enough of it, but I definitely look at it differently. It's definitely, the business side it's reality now. So, but in closing, I just want to say thank you all for coming. So I hope you found some of the information useful, and if any of you have more specific questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes and field your questions. I have my business plan up here. Feel free to thumb through it. I'm fine with it. And I have free drink tokens for everybody too, to get you to come visit us in the breweries. So if you want a free drink token and a sticker, come on up. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.